Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we'd do a mixed haul. Picked up some stuff, not as much as I usually get between videos, but I picked up some stuff. I had some uh, some sale money. I'm still paying back for the computer that I bought, my savings. But what I did was, so if you haven't watched any of my videos, and this is the first video that you've come across, um, I'm a collector. I like to collect CDs, music, LPs, movies in all their forms, books, uh, sports cards, all that, right? So, um, and how I finance it, since I don't make very much money, and most of the money that I make ends up going into, taking care of my family, the mortgage, and all that other kind of stuff. What I do is on the side, I'll like buy and sell media, right? So I'll go out maybe to a thrift store or to an estate sale or something else, or maybe there's a bulk purchase that I can make. And what I'll do is I'll pick something up for one price and then I'll sell it for a higher price. And the difference between the two is what finances my collecting, right? So I don't, put a burden on my family because I want to, go out and buy a CD or buy a film or something like that, right? I mostly buy used. Occasionally I will buy new stuff, but most of the new stuff that I end up getting are it's through gifts like Christmas presents or birthday presents, that kind of thing, right? Myself, I have difficulty paying a new price for something that you know, I can reasonably assume that I will find it eventually used, probably for more than half uh, off that price, right? Um, so why buy it new? But that's just me. And some people, and I congratulate them. I want them to continue to behave in that way because it helps me as well. Um, People will sometimes want something, and they're earning money. They have the right to spend their money as they so choose, and they'll buy it new, and they'll pay like a higher price than I will, right? But those are the people that end up, eventually they get bored of whatever they buy, or maybe they don't want to keep that movie or that CD or whatever, and then they'll end up selling it or giving it to a thrift store or whatever, and that's where I'll end up picking it up for a much less price, right? So it's the only way that I could afford doing what I'm doing. Anyway, so what I did was I bought um I was cleaning out my basement. My den is the area where I have all my collecting stuff. My wife and I agreed that I would keep my hobby in the basement, let's say. So my den is in the basement. So I set it up the way I want. The problem is that I bought so much things to resell that the area turned into more of a storage area for the stuff that I'm selling. And what I decided to do was I decided to clean all that stuff up and set it up. So what I did was I bought like some Kallax shelves, the 3x4s. I got two of them. Well, I bought one myself, and I got one for Father's Day. I bought uh, a TV. Um, well, I moved the TV that was in the basement here because I wanted to watch Blue Jays games upstairs in my bedroom, and it was a smart TV, so I moved that up in the bedroom, and I took the one that's in the bedroom and I brought it down here, and it's not a smart TV. So what I did was I decided I'd buy a computer and hook it up and use that TV as a monitor. And if I want to play a DVD or a Blu-ray, I attached a Blu-ray player to it, or I can do it through by transferring the film into a digital and watch it that way if I want. On a hard drive, I've got like an external hard drive with an external tower with 5 hard drives in it, full of stuff that I've transferred off of disk. So, um, but what I needed was a computer because the computers that I had have all died in the meantime. But the TVs in the house are smart TVs, so you don't really need a computer anymore to attach to them, to play Netflix or any other thing off of a computer. You can do it directly with your TV, right? But this one doesn't have the smart capacity to it, but it's like a 55-inch, 60-inch TV, flat screen TV. It's perfectly fine. So I'm not going to go buy another TV and throw this TV out or whatever, right? So what I did was I said, well, I do need a computer anyways. At least I should have one computer in the house that isn't a laptop. So I bought it, and what I bought was this. All right. So the Mini ITI2. Have you ever seen these things? They're like you know, they're the size of the palm of your hand, right? You look at it, that's the front of it, and that's the actual size. So here's my hand, and this is the actual size. The box or whatever is the actual size. It's smaller, and that would be the back of it, right? Um, so this was it's like a $1,200 mini computer. It's a very powerful machine. I mean, for office use or for business use or for personal use, all great. If you're going to run average games, playing with it, you can do that as well. But I mean, if you're a serious gamer, this probably isn't the computer that you'll buy. You'll buy a tall tower with a really powerful, with a really powerful computer, right? Um, but for your average normal guy, these mini PCs are extremely cool because they fit in the size of your hand. You don't have this bulky thing standing beside your TV. It's only a little thing. So so I bought it. It was like 1,200 new, but Best Buy was having a sale online off of them for it was like 600. So 600, 699. I can't remember. Anyways, it was after tax. It was just under $900. So what I did was I took money out of my savings and I purchased it. And now I have it, but now I'm going to pay back that savings. So what I haven't been buying a lot of stuff for the personal, for my collections lately. The only stuff that I've really been buying is stuff that I can resell later. But occasionally something comes through, and what I did was I always have a bit of money that I can spend because I always pay back my savings if like there's been two big purchases that I've made over the last 2 or 3 years that I had to take money out of my savings. One was like a like a 2000 movies, boutique Blu-ray movies and DVD movies that a person was selling. I got those for $600, and then this purchase of this new computer, right? So I just pay it back over time because I'll sell a book for two, and then I'll find a book for maybe $2 or $3 and sell it for $6, $7, $8, that kind of thing. Over time it builds up, right? Um, so what I do is when I do take money out of my savings, I will um, put it back, pay it back, right? But the money that somebody buys, let's say somebody buys a book off me and they give me cash, I'll keep that money and use it to buy items or whatever. But if they want to do an e-transfer, then I'll take the e-transfer and then I'll put it back into the savings. And I keep a document on my phone of how much I still owe and how much I'm paying back and so on and so forth, right? So um, after a few months, I'll end up having it paid back or whatever, right? So the one I got was this one. So it's really cool. It's really small, fits easily beside your TV, and it's a powerful computer. And now I do most of the work that I used to do on my laptop. I do it on that because I prefer to sit on my couch. And you just have, you have a USB mouse and, a Bluetooth keyboard, or both of them being Bluetooth or whatever. And then you just sit on your couch, and your TV is basically your computer screen, right? So that's what I've been doing. But I have to pay that money back, so I haven't been paying a lot into increasing my collection. But stuff still comes through. I still see some stuff that I will pick up because I do have some cash, because people will pay cash for stuff that they buy off me rather than do e-transfers. So it's kind of a split in half. Half goes towards the savings. The other half I have to buy stuff maybe to add to my collection or to buy stuff to resell. So I thought I'd go through that and see it. So the first thing I ended up getting was this, which is the mini IT12. All right. And this is from, what's the name of the company? It's uh, Geekcom. Geekcom. Now I've been using it uh, maybe a month now, I guess. I've been 3 weeks to a month, something like that. I've been using it. No issues, man. It's awesome. And for such a small machine, it has like three USB ports that you can hook in. So I've hooked like external hard drives into them. I've stuck a expansion USB that you plug it into one USB connection, and on the other end you have four USB connections to it. So then I just keep adding shit, and it takes it. Well, there's like one, two, three, four, five. There's 7 hard drives on this computer, and no issues. So I'd recommend this. If you haven't come across it, it will definitely save you a lot of space. Let's put it that way. And it's a pretty strong uh, machine, right? All right, so that's the first thing I bought. Let's go through. Let's go through some CDs because I wanted to talk about something. All right, so I went to my local. Well, it's not HMV, but it's a similar thing. It's a media store. There's only one really media store chain left in Canada, right? And so I went to mine at the local mall. And I was looking for the latest Beaches album. I'll show it here, all right? Because when they when the Beaches first started playing music and they hit the radio, I heard the song T-shirt, and I thought that was a really catchy tune, right? So I investigated them, and they ended up, it's hold on one second. So it was on their first album that they released. So they released 2 EPs independently. They're from Toronto. They're from the Beaches area of Toronto. That's why they called themselves the Beaches. There's an area in Toronto that runs along Lake Ontario that has like 3 or 4 beaches that people go to swim or whatever. And so that area, they designated that area. It's called the Beaches, right? So I think two of the members of the Beaches grew up in the Beaches, so they decided to call themselves the Beaches. Um, so uh, so I picked up their first album because I really liked the. They had 2 singles off it. One was "Money" and the other one was "T-shirt." And that "T-shirt" song was really catchy. I really enjoyed it. So hey, I said, you know, uh, and this is what I want to discuss. I usually don't really. I like female singers better than male singers, but when it comes to rock bands, you know, uh, I prefer male rock bands over female rock bands. Well, there's just not a lot of female rock bands in the first place. So when you come across a female rock band that's really good, um, I get excited for it. It's like cool. I get to hear, a woman's voice and women playing. You get them every once in a while, but mostly women tend to fall into the pop category rather than the rock. I mean, you have your Lita Fords or Joan Jetts and that kind of thing, but most women who uh, get into music, they're usually singing pop songs, right? So they're not really into rock or whatever, right? So when you see a band, especially a 4-piece band that's all women, not just one woman who's the lead singer, and then you have men as the musicians, which a lot of bands are. But actually, a whole female rock band. It's awesome to see something that they put out that's really good. You really enjoy. Now, I'm of the opinion, and other people may not be of that opinion, but I'm of the opinion that it's hard to relate to women in art. All right, me being a male. Okay, so let me explain that because I don't think I explained it too well. Because a person online called me extremely misogynistic because I did a review on their first album online, and this girl called me like seriously misogynistic, right? So, but let me explain. Okay, so Um, you take writers, let's say stand-up comedians, musicians, lyric writers, musicians. Um, when they're women, it's much more difficult for me as a man to relate to that. I don't know if other men have difficulty relating to that or not, but I find if I'm watching a comedian and the comedian is a woman, uh, it's rare to find a woman that is as funny as some of the men comedians I listen to because I'm a man. So when a man makes a joke, he's making it from a male perspective, and since I'm a male, I find it quite funny. When a woman makes a joke, she's making it from a woman perspective, and then a man has to make the leap into trying to think the way a woman thinks, and then maybe they'll find some humor in it, right? But a lot of the stuff that women find funny, men don't really find funny, or at least I don't, right? So, or I don't find it as funny, let's say. So when you're reading writers, what I've read, you know, hundreds, you know, thousands of books, all right, in my lifetime. And the women writers that I enjoy as much as the male writers that I enjoy are few and far between. All right, and there's usually more women writers than men writers because women have a tendency to go into writing, right? Um, so, but I don't really relate too well with women writers because they're writing from a woman's perspective, right? And I'm not a woman, right? So, same thing with musicians. When a woman writes a song, she's writing it from a female point of view, not from a male point of view, and therefore it's hard to um, relate as easily to what they're saying um, than it is for a male writer, right? So um, it's just my opinion. It's the way that I personally feel, the way that I think, right? Is when I'm listening to a woman musician um, who does her own writing, I don't relate to that song as well as I do as if it was a man. Same with the writer, same with the stand-up comedian, that kind of thing. Whenever you're putting forth something that's artful from a female perspective, I don't see it as um, I don't relate to it as well, right? So I don't know if that's a unique experience for me or if it's a male experience. Who knows? But my guess would be, yeah, that a man would find a male comedian funnier than a woman comedian, would enjoy a book written from a male perspective more than from a female perspective, listen to music with lyrics that are written from a male perspective rather than a female perspective. It's just because of, we're men or whatever, right? So, but I'm not going to, you know, represent all men. I can only represent myself. All right. So anyway, so I thought it kind of funny because I wrote it, and the review that I gave for Late Show, which was their first album, was extremely a positive uh, rating. What I said was is that there's a bit of a hump to get over when you're listening to women's songs if you're a man because you don't relate to it as well, right? So if you can get over that hump, right, and a woman can write the music in a way that a man would find it enjoyable as well, then that's talent, right? And the Beaches do that. All right, their songs are really catchy. They're really well written, and you can enjoy them even though it's a female perspective. You can enjoy them anyways, right? Um, so anyway, so I went in to buy their second release. Uh, I'll put it here again. Um, but see, they signed with Universal. So they wrote. They did two EPs, and then they had some buzz. So Universal, I think it was Universal, signed them, and then they put out their main uh, album, which was Late Show, right? And then what happened after that is they put out two more EPs, and then they put out a second album. So I went in to find the second album. They didn't have it, but what the Beaches did do, Universal did, was release their third and fourth, the one that came between the first album and second album, the two EPs that came before, which were the Professional and Future Lovers and the Professional. Both EPs they joined together in one album and put it together and released it as Sisters Not Twins, the Professional Lovers album. All right, so which is basically the two EPs joined together in one album. And this actually won the Juno Award for it. The Juno is like the Grammys for Canada, right? So this won the Juno. So it's a double EP that they put together that was released that they did music for after Late Show, and then they ended up winning, the Juno for it. So that's kind of impressive. You don't usually see somebody winning a Juno with EPs, right? So, anyways, extremely good double EP. So I picked it up because I couldn't find their second album. So, what happened in their second album is my understanding is that they dropped Universal. Universal didn't drop them; they dropped Universal because they didn't want to, I guess, be with the label anymore. And then they released their second album more on their own. And I think maybe that's why it's difficult to find. Maybe. Um, so I haven't been able to find it yet, but when I do, I'm going to buy it. All right. So I ended up going into the mall and I found this at least, so I bought this and I've listened to it and it's extremely good. If you haven't listened to the Beaches are kind of like punk revival, punk rock revival, garage rock type of sound, which is my wheelhouse, which is what I really enjoy for music. I enjoy punk and garage music. Um, I like female-led jazz. If there's going to be a singer, I prefer a female singer over a male singer when it comes to jazz. And those are the two. And I really like electronic music. So those are the main ones that I really enjoy. But anyway, so that's the beaches. But I did end up finding a lot more CDs. So here's the next one: the Sugar Cubes here today, tomorrow, next week. All right. So I went into the thrift store and I found this, and I go, how do I know the Sugar Cubes? Because there was a time period back, maybe 1998, 1999, around there, till about 2005, somewhere around there, um, late eight, late '90s into about halfway through the first decade of the new millennium, that I really got into music and I really researched it. I really listened to like thousands of albums for like a good 7 or 8 years. That's all I did. I didn't really. Well, I read books as well, but anyway. And I go, this is clicking into me for some reason. Why do I know the Sugar Cubes? And then it popped into me, yeah, this is the band that Bjork was in before she went solo with her debut album. And if you haven't tried Bjork debut, try it. Bjork is like an Icelandic singer, um, and her voice is up there with the greatest voices on the planet. Like, if you were to name the greatest female vocalists of all time, what would you say? Whitney Houston, my personal favorite, Sinead O'Connor, but you'd have to add Bork to it. Mariah Carey, maybe, um, Celine Dion. Um, these ones, the upper echelon of vocal artists. And my personal favorite, Sinead O'Connor, but Bjork is up there with it, right? So this is the band that she was in before she went solo and came out with debut, right? Um, I have not listened to the Sugar Cube, so I'm going to play this album. Uh, I did listen to most of Bjork's solo stuff, and it's pretty eclectic. It's pretty like quote unquote avant-garde, I guess you could call it. It's a bit out there. It's like a mix of electronic and other styles put together with Bjork's voice. Now, Bjork's voice is very unique because the way she sings is kind of quirky because English is her second language, right? She's from Iceland, so she speaks Icelandic and English as a second language. So when she's singing, she's usually singing in English, and you can hear that accent and that strangeness with her vocals, right? It adds a flavor to the vocals, but it can be a bit standoffish if you're not ready for it, right? Um, but man, powerful voice, extremely good voice, and so I picked up the Sugar Cubes to see how she was when she was in a band. Maybe it's more like mainstream style of music and less quirkiness, uh, uh, like her solo career has, right? So that's the Sugar Cubes here today, tomorrow, next week. I also found this, the best of Leonard Cohen, and this, I mean, it would be a good introduction to Leonard Cohen, but I would highly suggest that you pick up his albums because there's really not a bad song on any of Leonard Cohen's albums. So a lot of people will buy a best of to avoid all the bad songs that the band or the artist came out with that are boring or whatever, and then they just want the ones that were popular or the hits or whatever, right? And so what they'll do is they'll buy a compilation album instead, and then they can avoid all it saves them money. They get all the best songs, and then they don't have to buy all the albums, right? So it's kind of like a replacement. Well, this is a pretty good one, but this was put out in 1975 originally. So all the albums that he did after 75, you're not going to get any of the songs from it on it, right? So, he, what was it, in 88, 86, he put out I'm Your Man. Remember that album, I'm Your Man, that has Everybody Knows and I'm Your Man and First We Take Manhattan. All those songs, none of those songs are on here, but all the songs from his first like 4 or 5 albums, the best ones are here, like Suzanne, Sisters of Mercy, So Long Mary Ann, Bird on a Wire, Lady Midnight, The Partisan, Hey, That's No Way to Say Goodbye, and Famous Blue Raincoat, which is my favorite song by him. Last Year's Man, Chelsea Hotel number 2, Who by Fire, and Take This Longing, right? So it is a group of his best songs from his early albums. But if you like Leonard Cohen, this is kind of like, okay, it's an extra or whatever. You don't really need it because you have all of his albums. And I would highly suggest you track down and find this, all right, which I did, and I got it for like, I think it was $60. I don't know what it was new. I think it's over 100 new. But basically, it's all of his studio albums, um, all in one package, right? So when I found that, man, I got to get that, right? So I ended up going and getting that, and now I have all of his albums in one package. I really enjoy getting things like that, right? I just picked up a Bob Dylan package like that as well, right? Used. These are all used. I'm not buying them new, right? All right. So next up is Suede. Suede. Their first album is probably their best album. I mean, not for me, but most people, of the two guys, the Brown album with the two. Anyways, I'll put it here: the two guys kissing or whatever, right? Or, I think it's two guys, maybe a girl and a guy, if I remember. But anyways, that was their first album, and they're basically part of the Britpop movement of the '90s. If you remember, back in the '60s, there was a huge Britpop movement that came across the ocean to North America. Led by the Beatles and all that, and then kind of Britpop went. You didn't hear much about it anymore. And then there was a big resurgence of Britpop in the '90s, um, with the Stone Roses started it basically, with their, I think they played at the Isle of Wight. Don't quote me on it, but I'm just trying to use my memory. Anyways, they came out with their self-titled album, and it's their only good album. They came out with a Second Coming, which was their second album later on, but there was too much infighting in that band that they pretty much broke up. So they only have really one great album, and that's the first album. I'll show it here. And if you don't have this album, you're missing out. You really need to get this album, one of the greatest albums of all time. All right. So, and that started the Britpop movement. And then what happened was Oasis and Blur kind of took over because, the Stone Roses kind of, there was too much infighting. And then they got together with a bunch of animosity to make the second album. And their second album was very good. So, um, but, so Oasis kind of took over, and then they had a string of three or four albums that were really good. Blur had a couple albums that were really good. Um, what was the one with Jarvis Cocker? I keep forgetting that band, but they had a couple albums that were really good as well, all in the Britpop thing, and Suede was part of that, right? So this is Suede's. I think this is the album that came after their first one, and it is called Coming Up. All right, it's hard to read that coming up there, right? So, but anyway, so I listened to their first album because I got into Britpop. Um, so I listened to a bunch of Oasis and Blur and Jarvis Cocker's band, which I don't know why I can't. Different class. Pulp is the name of it. In Different Class. I'll show it here. That's their best album. If you haven't picked up that album is really good as well. And anyway, so there's a whole group of Britpop artists that were kind of put all in together in the '90s. And man, that was a very, like a really good musical movement. Even though Blur um, were kind of, London centric or like Britain centric. I mean, a lot of their songs that are about things that are uniquely happening in Britain, and the slang that they use sometimes it's hard to follow. But once you get over that hump, Blur was really good as well, right? So, um, but Suede was in there. So I found this. I haven't listened to this song, so this album, I mean, and the first album I listened to was that one that I pointed out, and I didn't like it very much actually. So we'll see if this one improves it or not. All right, so that's Suede. Um, then I found this Wilco album. All right, for $2. All right, this is their live album in Chicago. When did they do this one? In 2005 in Chicago. And basically, Wilco Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, that album here, I'll show it here. That's probably their best album. But they're kind of like country-ish type of sounding band, and some of their stuff is really good. And this is probably, if you were just to take all the live albums that have been put out on CD in the 2000s, this is probably one of the best. All right. So if you haven't listened to this, give this a try if you kind of like country music, right? Anyway, so this is recorded live at the Vic Theater in Chicago, May 4th to 7th, 2005. All right. Really nice album. All right. So then um, I know music pretty well from, let's say, 2005, going backwards, all right, to the '60s or whatever, right? So, you know, where the movement from rock and roll, guys like Little Richard and that and the Elvis era. Once you go past that and you hit the 60s, and you get the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and those guys. From there up to like maybe mid 2005 or whatever, I know the music pretty well. All right, so um, but after that, and even during the 2000s, so the switch over to the new millennium, I kind of moved from music and reading books uh, to uh, to doing other stuff. I was traveling and things like that, and I had like some upheaval in my personal life, right? So anyway, uh, so what happens? But I'm still listening to music in that time period, right? Because there's so much of it that you can listen to, right? So, and I'm not really paying attention. I'm getting older. I'm not really paying attention to the post 2000 music as much, especially after 2010. But every once in a while, somebody will recommend, like I'm online talking music or whatever, somebody will recommend something, or something gets through the minutia to my eardrums, and I go, wow, that's really good. And, Billie Eilish was one of those. I don't know what your opinion on Billie Eilish is, but her two albums. I'm still searching for her third one yet, but her first two albums, man, quite enjoyable. I really enjoyed that style of music, right? So, um, but I don't really relate to the lyrics as much. Right? But the music with her voice, extremely good. So I don't really, I just need to hear her voice. It doesn't matter what she's singing, right? So, um, anyway, so I got some recommendation. I was talking to a guy about Tyler Childress. He's kind of like old style country, right? I kind of like old style country better than the country that kind of got popular when Shania Twain was releasing albums and Garth Brooks was releasing albums. That era there in the '90s, where country went away from its roots and went towards more of a pop sound, right? And I mean, it was okay to listen to. I mean, Shania Twain was a huge star, right? So, um, but I never really got into that very much. I always found the old style countries, like Willie Nelson or Johnny Cash or Waylon Jennings. These kind of guys, um, I really enjoyed more, right? So then Tyler Childress ended up putting out an album. It's a black album with like a, I don't know if it's like a moon spot or a sunspot on it. I can't remember the name of it. I'll put it here. And I was just browsing on YouTube, and I came across a video of his. So I watched the video and I really enjoyed it. So I ended up picking up that album on LP because I couldn't find it on CD. I still haven't found it on CD yet, but I did find it on LP. So anyway, so I was talking about him, and then the guy that I was speaking with mentioned the Southern rock country band that I may enjoy because of it, and that's the Drive-By Truckers. So I found in the same thrift store, I found two of the Drive-By Truckers albums. So I thought maybe I would give them a listen. What do you think of Drive-By Truckers? Do you like them? I'm thinking I'm going to like them because it's Southern rock, Southern country rock kind of thing, and I enjoy that kind of music. So it's not my favorite kind of music, but it's my favorite kind of country music, where it's more old school country, right? So we got Blessing and a Curse, and we got Brighter Than Creation's Dark. All right, so we'll see how this is. I'll listen to them. Maybe I'll review them. All right. Also in the same thrift store, I found the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. All right, so I don't know what this one is. Fever to Tell. All right, so another band that has been on the peripheral of my vision or whatever. But I said, yeah, let's give these guys a try. Let's see what these guys are like. So we'll do that. And then back in the early 2000s, I came across an album called Fox Confessor Brings the Brings the Blues, Brings the Flood, if I remember correctly. Anyways, it was a digipack CD that I picked up from Nico Case. That's the name of the artist, and it's called Fox Confessor Brings the Flood, if I remember correctly. I'll put it here, and has a fox on the front of it. Anyways, that was a really good album. If you haven't listened to that's really good. Now she is an American, but she was in a Canadian band. Like she lived on the West Coast in Vancouver for the longest time. She was in a band called the New Pornographers, which is one of the West Coast best Canadian bands, right? And And so then she went on a solo career. Well, she kind of left that band and then she did her own thing where she was the leader and she started a band called, well, here it is here, Nico Case and her boyfriends, Nico Case and her boyfriends. And then she just went solo and became Nico Case, right? So I found two of her albums, Nico Case and her boyfriend's Furnace Room Lullaby, all right? And then just her as a solo artist with Blacklisted, all right? So I got two Nico Case. But if you haven't listened to Fox, it's the only one that I've listened to from her. That was a non-new pornographer song album, anyways. Um, Listen to that. I think that one's probably her best, but it's a judgment call because I haven't listened to much of her other stuff. And then also when I was online, there was a song that kind of hit the YouTube thing that I ended up, I'm just browsing, so I'll put on a song that I know and I'll listen to it. And then like YouTube, if you put it on, you like autoplay or whatever, they'll just start popping up songs for you. And one of the songs was "That's Not My Name" by the Ting Tings. These guys are out of Great Britain, kind of like a poppy punk type of sound to them. And I really enjoyed that song. So I ended up finding the album that was on. I'll put it here. All right. And I listened to that album and I enjoyed it. And then I found this one, which is Sounds from Nowheresville. So I decided I want to give these guys a try with a second album, right? So I will do that. If you haven't heard the Ting Tings, they're kind of fun. Um, and then going back to the day when speed metal and hardcore metal was the thing. Um, you had a British invasion of a bunch of like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and all those guys back in the '80s. Then it kind of continued later on. Um, but one band that kind of got mixed in with that, with Metallica and all those guys, was Pantera. And A Vulgar Display of Power is probably their best album. I'll put it here. But I haven't heard this album, so when I saw this one in the thrift store as well, I decided I would pick it up. And this is a Far Beyond Driven. Far Beyond Driven. All right. So this is one of their later albums. Remember, when is this? '88 or something? No, '94. Yeah. So one of their later albums. All right. So we'll give that a listen. And then I came across this, and I knew nothing about this album. All right. And the reason why I didn't know nothing about this album because these guys are kind of like an obscure punk band from Quebec. All right. So but they have that. If you look at punk bands covers, they're always kind of something like that. They kind of do a retro thing on their album, and then add a little you know uh, nastiness to it or whatever, right? So this one, they're called the Rocketeers, and this came out in 2005, if I remember correctly, and it's called Invasion Rock and Roll. And it's basically a punk band from Quebec. So I haven't heard it, so I'll give it a shot, see what it's like. All right, I have two other ones that I picked up at another thrift store. One of them was um, Nelly Furtado, who's a Canadian from the West Coast again, and she came out with an album in the 2000s that penetrated my brain as well because of the song "I'm Like a Bird." I really enjoyed that song, so I kind of looked into Nelly Furtado and her album "Whoa Nelly," which is this one. This is her best album. I listened to that one like for a good 3 months, just over and over. She had a style to her. It's basically pop music with a little mix of mild hip hop in it and some Portuguese influence because she's of Portuguese descent, right? She has a song on that album that she actually sings in Portuguese. But overall, the sound was unique. It wasn't your atypical um, pop sound, right? So it kind of grabbed my attention. So and then I just fucking listened to it for forever. And then she came out with another one, which was a Red album. I'll put it here. I can't remember the name of the album, but I'll put it here. And that one wasn't as good as the first one. So then I kind of lost touch with Nelly Furtado after that. But then I came across this one. And I said, it's been years since I listened to Nelly Furtado. And here's her album, The Spirit Indestructible. All right. And this one came out in 2012. So I thought maybe I'd give her another shot, see what happens. All right. Have you listened to this one? Anyway, so we'll give Nelly Furtado a shot. And then I found one of the classic greatest albums of all time from the Australian British band. I guess they made their name in Australia, but they're all from Great Britain or whatever, right? But they're they're an Australian band, really. So AC/DC and their best album, which is Back in Black, which is the first album that they put out after, what was their lead singer's name? Not Brian Johnson. He's the one that joined for this album. Bon Scott. Bon Scott. When Bon Scott died, and they went searching for another lead singer, and they found Brian Johnson, and then they did this album. This album just blew up. I mean, Back in Black, Hell's Bells, you know, all those songs on this album was, I mean, one of the greatest albums, rock albums of all time. All right, so I think that's all the CDs. So uh, let's do some books. Let's keep the movies for last. All right, not very many books. I have The Prophet by Gibran. All right, Khalil Gibran. He's like a, I don't know what the big deal of this, but this book is like a huge deal. It sells so easily, and I read it. So for the longest time, I didn't read it. It's kind of like a philosophical. It's basically a story about a guy who's leaving to go back to an island that he lived at, and he's some sort of, like mystical guru of some sort. He's got all this wise, and people come up and ask him questions. If I remember correctly, it's been a while since I read it. Um, anyway, so Gibran was a philosopher from the Middle East, all right, and the Prophet is his most known book, and millions of people have read it, right? So, um, and it's just about a guy leaving, and before he leaves, uh, the whole village, whoever comes out and asks him questions about stuff, and then he answers them, and they're supposed to be like mind blowing, good pieces of advice and everything. But then I read it and I was like, really? It's just basically common sense, most of the stuff he's saying in this. But people have grabbed onto this maybe because it's foreign. It's not from North America or whatever. It's like from you know the Middle East or whatever. Like people in the West tend to get attracted to things that aren't in the West. Like Eastern philosophy, Eastern religions. A whole bunch of people have become Buddhists or that kind of thing. So this is, I think, goes along in this vein. But wasn't really impressed with that book. Second one I picked up was The Taming of the Shrew by Shakespeare. Shakespeare is the greatest uh, English writer of all time. And The Taming of the Shrew is one of his known, but not his best known plays in Oxford. This is the newest style of Oxford World Classics that have come out. They're trade paperbacks. They're really nice. They always have a really nice image on the front of them, right? And they have like the Oxford Shakespeare, which is basically all of his plays in individual book form. You can get the Oxford Shakespeare that's one book. Um, it's usually thick. It's $100 or so or whatever. I have a copy of it that I'm selling. Anyway, so Shakespeare sells well, so I figured I'd pick that up. Um, and the last book is a Penguin classic, and this is the latest cover of the Penguin classics. All right, and this one is I always have problems with Greek names. Herodotus, the histories. Basically, um, uh, this is Herodotus' account of, what was it again? One of the masterpieces of classic literature. The Histories describes how a small and quarrelsome band of Greek city-states united to repel the might of the Persian Empire. All right, so it's his history of the Persian Empire's invasion of Greece, right? So uh, these usually sell pretty well. And if you're looking for ancient history, you can't go wrong with Penguins because they, half their library is ancient literature, right? So um, and they're really nice. Now this edition is kind of banged up, so I usually avoid banged up copies. But this one, you don't come across it a lot. So, and the Penguin Classics, you have the occasional person. Same with the Oxford World's Classics, or the Signet Classics, or the Modern Library Classics, or whatever. All these different classic booksellers or whatever, right? Most of them are purchased by students, right? You do have the occasional person that will pick them up as well, just to expand their knowledge. But a bulk of the sales of Penguin Classics and other classics are people that are in school learning about it, right? So then the teacher says, here's your book list, go pick them up, and half of them are going to be, most of them are going to be in the Penguin Classics or the Oxford World Classics or whatever, right? So they're popular with students. So um, and they're easy. They're pretty easy to resell. Some of the ones that I pick up stay on the shelf for a while until, let's say, especially in the summer because most students are off. But then in the fall, they end up, go searching for books and they can buy them new. But the students, they want to get them. They're on a budget or whatever, so they usually look for used stuff, and you can usually sell it to them. So instead of them paying $12 or $15 for a book, you can sell it to them for 5 or 6 or whatever, right? So all right, so that's the histories. All right, so now let's do the movies last. All right, so I went into a thrift store yesterday, and I found these four films. I found Dirty Dancing, new. All right, still in its plastic wrap. All right, this one is the remastered version of Dirty Dancing with Patrick Swayze. Right. So this is a popular film like Pretty Woman for girls. Right. It's more of a girl film than a guy film. But they really enjoy this one, like they do Pretty Woman and a few other films. And so this one sells, and I picked it up for a reasonable price, and it's new, so I can sell it for a bit more than if it was used. So it was worth picking up. So that's what I'll do with that one. It's basically about a girl named Baby. I don't know why they would name their child Baby, but anyways, and she's like 16, 17, and she's blossoming into a woman. And Patrick Swayze is a dance teacher, and he kind of takes her under his wing, and then love happens and everything. Anyways, it's a great romance story, right? So I also found this one, and I find these two films hilarious. All right, and that's Grumpy Old Man and Grumpier Old Man, which is basically Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. Now, back I think it was in the '70s, late '60s, early '70s, they came out with a film called The Odd Couple, which ended up going on to TV, and it was like Randall and Jack Klugman. Tony Randall and Jack Klugman played the two characters on TV, and that was a hit comedy for like when I was a little kid. It was on TV all the time. Um, but it came from a movie, The Odd Couple, which starred Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, right? Um, so they decided they wanted to revive that kind of vibe, right? It hit the TV, but it hadn't been on TV for like 30 years or whatever. And the film was quite popular when it came out, and they said, "Hey, let's revitalize that dynamic between those two actors." And so they came out with Grumpy Old Men, and then it was popular, so they came out with Grumpier Old Men. And both films are quite funny if you haven't watched them. So I really like to get, like if there's a sequel or more sequel, I like to get it in one package rather than have them individual because it saves space on. Instead of having two, you have one. It saves space on the shelves, right? So this is good. So I have this on DVD. I have it on DVD, but they're individuals, not so I can take both of those DVDs out, put this smaller Blu-ray case in, and it saves me some space, right? So and better quality, right? All right, so that's Grumpy Old Man. It's basically about two ornery guys that are friends, but they're always like, you know, this one is they're competing over a woman named Anne Margaret. And then the second one, they're kind of married, and Sophia Loren comes into the picture. Anyways, they're quite funny. And then Wolfgang Peterson came out with a really good film starring George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg, and that was The Perfect Storm. If you remember this film, the ending is kind of sucks, but overall the film was quite good, and it was filmed extremely well with all those water scenes, right? So um, it's quite a eye-opening type of film, and uh, Wolfgang Peterson is one of the guys that I collect. So I have this on DVD, but I didn't have it on Blu-ray. So I upgraded. All right. And last but not least, again, a Rob Reiner film, Stand By Me. It's based on that story by Stephen King, basically about the four kids that get together, go looking because there's a dead body and they want to go see it, right? And that kind of opens their eyes in a way. So it's a I don't know if it's Reiner's greatest film, but it's up there. And like I have it on DVD, so I found it on Blu-ray, so I picked it up. If you haven't watched this, this is the 25th anniversary edition of it. So, uh, all right, so that's okay. So now, in a private sale, a gentleman was selling this Jim Jarmusch Criterion Collection film called Dead Man, which stars Johnny Depp, right? Um, so this is a pretty good film. I've seen it, but I don't remember much of it. And usually, if I've watched a film and I don't remember it very much, it means it was okay, because I will remember a really bad film and the reason why I thought it was really bad, or I will remember a really good film that impressed me because I'm going to watch it more than once. But I did watch this, but I didn't watch it more than once, so I'm assuming it's an okay film. But Criterion thought it was good enough to put it in their collection, so um, I'm gonna have to watch it again, right? And Jarmusch is a director that I collect, so this is number 919 in the collection. So I'm just over 500 in the collection. I think they're up to about 1,200, right? So I'm like 700 down, still collecting, right? So that's Dead Man. If you haven't seen it, looks like that. Nice Blu-ray. And then for Father's Day, I got this. Now, I think it was for Christmas. My daughter bought me. So I have all the the Japanese films of Godzilla, um, but I didn't have his competition, which was Gamera. Now Arrow put out a nice two edition box set, one of the Showa era, and the other one was the Wa. I'll put it here. Japanese names don't roll off my tongue very well, so I'll put it here. So volume one is this one, all right, which is the Showa era, all right, and then there was a second era, and it was called the whatever era. It's right here, all right. So my daughter ended up buying me that, but she didn't buy me the first volume. So I went. So I said, okay. So my wife got me the first volume. So this is just came in the mail. Basically, it's I think six films on four four Blu-rays. It's got Gamera the Giant Monster, Gamera versus Battlegon, and Gamera versus Giads. On disc two, disc three has Gamera versus Viras and Gamera versus Guran. And then disc four has Gamera versus Jaeger, Gamera versus Zigra, and Gamera Super Monster, right? So these were the earliest films, and then there was a second era, um, and they're all in competition with Godzilla. Basically, it's a giant kaiju turtle that has the power of flight. His he can put it in his legs or his arms and his legs inside of his shell, and then he can shoot out fire or whatever, and then he can fly around and everything. Anyways, he goes battles other gaijus to save humanity and that kind of thing, right? So now I have both volumes. Now, at the time, I think Arrow put out the whole set in one volume, but I only knew about that because I went on Amazon. And these ones are selling in Canada on Amazon for around $59. Um, but then I looked and I said, oh, there's one that has both of them together all in one box set. That would be even cooler to have rather than have two box sets. But then it's not in print anymore. So I looked at it and it's like $450, $500 for that. And I went, what? And it looked like it was a secondary seller, not Amazon originally. So I wonder how many people do that. I mean, buy that. You know what I mean? Like, how bad is the urge to get something that they really want to get that they're willing to pay $400 or $500 for it? When new, probably it was like maybe 100 new, right? And now because Arrow isn't selling them anymore, or maybe they are. I don't know. I didn't really. But when I went on Amazon, it was like $450. And went, number one is, would anybody buy that? Because so often if when you go on to Amazon, right? Like if you go on to Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace or eBay, you know, uh, you'll get some things that are ridiculously priced, but most of the time they're pretty reasonably priced, right? Um, but you go on Amazon and you see secondary sellers on Amazon, and some of the pricing in it is like ridiculous, and that's one of them, right? So, uh, would you pay 450 for the whole Gamera set of films from Arrow? Um, I wouldn't, you know what I mean? But hey, if they continue to list these things at really expensive prices, somebody's got to buy them, right? Somebody ends up buying them. Otherwise, they would stop doing it. They wouldn't waste their time, right? So there is somebody that maybe really want it so much for their collection that they're willing to pay a premium for it. I guess I don't know, but it wouldn't be me. Let's put it that way. All right, so that's the Gamera. And the last thing I did was today. I just picked up. So what I used to do is I'd used to go on YouTube or I'd go on Spotify on the computer, um, or on the smart TV, and I'd listen to music. All right, but they ended up changing it, and or on my phone, right? So they end up. What happened is there's too many commercials in between the songs, right? So you need to subscribe. So if you want to listen to music ad free on YouTube or on Spotify, you need to join the premium service and pay a monthly subscription fee. And I'm going, no. And at first, Spotify was pretty good because you could play. I didn't mind the commercial every once in a while because most of the commercials on Spotify are just promoting Spotify, right? So, uh, but YouTube kind of gets ridiculous, especially like if you're sitting in front of your TV and you're playing YouTube. Usually, the commercial will last 10 seconds or 5 seconds or whatever, and then you can click skip it or whatever and avoid it, right? But if you're not at your TV, what happens is sometimes they'll run 3 or 4 30-second commercials before they get back to the music because you're not, at it, right? You're doing other things while listening to music. So they know that they can pop in a few commercials. And since you're not at the computer, they'll play, and then they can make that money off the advertiser, even though the person isn't watching the screen for that advertisement, right? So, um, but anyway, and what Spotify did, I don't know if they did it. I don't know, maybe it's me, but at one time I could play an album on Spotify and it would play all the way through. All right. And maybe every song or every couple of songs they put an ad in there and then continue on with the album, right? And it was fine with most albums except for the concept albums or the albums that are trying to put you in a certain mood. Maybe they're mellow and relaxed, and so you want to hear the whole album uh, commercial free because the interruption commercials bring you back up to where you were before, and you just want to relax or whatever. So like listen to ambient music, and then you get a commercial for a monster truck thing that's coming to your town or whatever. And it's like totally. Anyways, so but I didn't mind it too much because you could listen to the whole album. I like listening to albums. I don't like to listen to individual songs, right? But what happened a while back is every time I played an album, I get maybe the first two songs on the album, and then Spotify would hijack it and start playing just random songs that are similar. And then maybe they'd play one, and then they'd go back to the album and play an album song. But eventually, what happened was before the whole album was played, you had listened to 5 or 6 songs that are not on the album from different artists, and then it just goes off on a tangent, and then you don't even hear the album anymore, right? And I went, well, that's a pain in the ass. Um, and the only way you can play the whole album is to subscribe, right? So I went, screw this. I have like 10,000 CDs. I would just play them in the car. But now if I want to listen to music at the house, it got more and more difficult. So what I decided was to give up on YouTube and Spotify and all those. And what I did was I ended up buying like a portable stereo system with a five CD thing, and I have one upstairs. I have one down here in the basement. Um, when I'm in the car, I can listen to the CDs on the CD player. So and now with the computer that I bought, right? The computer that I bought, and I attached my hard drives to it. I have my whole music library on that, so I can just play it with Windows Media Player if I want, right? So now I don't have to deal with Spotify or YouTube when I'm trying to listen to music, right? So, and what I did was now that it's convenient, I took my phone and I attached it to my computer, and then I put a bunch of albums that I really enjoy, and I put them on my phone. And then what I did was earlier on, if you watch some previous videos of mine, I bought a House of Marley record player turntable, uh, and the the speaker for it. It's called a Get Together Mini um, speaker for it, and so I'm playing records as well, right? Um, well, now that I was expanding downstairs and cleaning everything up down here, what I did was I got two Kallax shelves, and now I can fit all my albums on the Kallax shelves because that's what they're made for originally. They're the perfect size to put an album standing up in each one of the sections. Here's a Kallax shelf, all right, and then you can add things to it. You can add like you can add a drawer to it. You can add a door to it. You can add all these accessories to put into those each of those cubes, right? So uh, IKEA is smart, right? So what I did was I bought all the bins, and then I put all my CDs in the bins that were in boxes, just taking up space, and and it looked ugly or whatever. So I bought uh, I have two Kallax units, 3x4 Kallax units, and one 2x4 Kallax unit that I'm using as a TV stand. And now all my albums are in that Kallax unit, and above it I have my record player. But what I've been using as I wasn't using my record player downstairs, it was down here, but it wasn't in a convenient place for me to actually, put a record on to it. I had to go around my couch and other things to try to get at it, so it wasn't convenient. But now I have it in the middle of the room on top of the Kallax shelf. Now I can access it easy, and right below it is all my albums, right? So I just pull out an album, put it on a record player. But I've been using the speaker, the Get Together Mini speaker, in the kitchen because I cook. I'll cook supper a lot for my family, and I like to listen to music while I'm in the kitchen. So I put a bunch of music on my phone, and then I just play it. Uh, you know, I sync it with the Get Together Mini, and I listen to music in the kitchen. So now that I'm using my record player downstairs, I had to take that Mini out of the kitchen. Now I don't have music in the kitchen if I want. So then I went online and I found used another one. So this is what I picked up today. All right. So this is the Get Together Mini. So it's a really good sounding um, Bluetooth speaker system. So this is the one that I used for my turntable, and now I'll put this one in the kitchen, and I'll run my music off of my phone, and so I can listen to music in the kitchen. I don't have to put up with Spotify and YouTube and all the commercials and everything, or having to subscribe. How many subscription services do you think people want? Right? Um, I have two. I have Netflix and I have Amazon Prime. That's all I want. All right. And even Amazon Prime, I'm thinking of dumping because they brought commercials in it. Now, whenever you watch a movie on Amazon Prime, you'll get one or two commercials at the beginning of it before the movie starts. And then sometimes they'll even break the movie and put a commercial in between parts of the movie. And once they did that, I could I could handle or tolerate a couple of commercials at the beginning before the film starts because they do that in the movie theater. But remember back in the 80s, there were no commercials. You didn't want it because you're so used to watching TV. You went to the movie theater to get away from commercials. So when you went into the movie theater, all they did was have all the previews of other movies that they're going to play, right? And then you watch the movie afterwards, and you didn't have to put up with the commercial. And then, like 20 years ago or whatever, they started putting commercials in the movie theater as well. So you fucking can't avoid commercials no matter where you go, right? So I mean, people got to get paid, I guess. But um, so in the movie theater, they have commercials. So you got used to that, but they were at the beginning of the movie, and you could actually avoid them if you showed up like 10 minutes late for your movie, and you get all that crap done, and you just watch the movie. Um, so what they did, uh, Amazon Prime Video now, you'll get commercials at the beginning of the film, and even sometimes they interrupt the film in order to give you a commercial as well. The beginning I could handle because it's like the movie theater, okay. I'll put up with it. I'll watch a couple of commercials at the beginning before I watch the film, but don't interrupt the film with a commercial. And once they did that, now I'm starting to think maybe I'm just going to cancel the service because they give you the option of having commercials, and you're paying the same amount as you did before with no commercials. Now they added commercials, and if you want to get rid of those commercials, now you got to add a premium thing to your Amazon Prime, and and then you won't get any commercials, right? So you're just paying them more. Now I just got Sportsnet because I wanted to watch the Blue Jays games, and that was like $20 a month. I'm going to get that for 6 months and watch the Blue Jays games, and after that, I'm going to cancel Sportsnet, and I think I might cancel Amazon Prime at the same time, and just stick with Netflix, I guess, uh, because I don't really like watching a show or especially a movie where uh, you know breaks in the movie they end up starting showing you commercials. It was like watching TV back in the 90s. So that was the Get Together Mini that I just picked up, and I think that's everything. All right, so hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave me a thumbs up. Um, think about subscribing. I'd appreciate it. And I'll talk to you in my next video. And you have a great day. Bye for now.